great fun. Myself and Joe, we were chatting the other day, and we decided it would be lovely to have a chat for this Harps online. I've already learned loads from our little chat that we've been having, and I was invited by Harp Ireland to, I suppose, describe a little bit about my journey, and no better person to counsel me through that than yourself, Joe, because I have come at it from a dinosaur's perspective, and you would probably have been appalled if you could have seen the setup for the first Zoom concert that I did back in September of 2020. But um, I suppose I was thinking when we were getting ready to do this today, I was thinking about what would have been useful for me to know before I was starting, because obviously we're all in a situation now where we're having to embrace music online in ways that we never did before. And dinosaurs like myself are having to get to grips with audio interfaces and compressor microphones and all sorts of cables we didn't have to deal with before. Pre-pandemic, I was a very happy, go lucky little harpist who would arrive at a gig with an emergency pickup in my bag, and otherwise just happy out to trust the very clever sound people to make the magic happen, and I would just focus on the harp. So it was a bit of a shocker when the first thing I was told was, well, if you want to do concerts online, you're going to need an audio interface. And sure, I didn't know what that was. So my first concert, I invested in an audio interface. I got one. I got a Studio 68C from PreSonus, and I sort of did a swap for an effects pedal for a compressor microphone. So I had one compressor microphone. I had a dodgy old microphone. I don't even know where it came from, or it was in the back of a cupboard somewhere.
I'm going to stop you there. I think you probably meant, I think you probably meant a condenser microphone.
Oh, I did. You see, there you go. Not a compressor, a condenser microphone. So I had my condenser microphone, not my compressor microphone, and my little handheld mic, and that's how I started. And I mean, I don't think I think I had possibly joined one or two Zoom birthday lockdown parties or something. Like I didn't have any experience of Zoom, and so really through the kindness of friends in the industry who sort of helped me out, who logged in remotely to my laptop and made sure that I understood the very, very basics of setting up sound, literally the buttons I needed to press on my audio interface to make sure that the phantom power was going to be on, that I could even get the sound, because when I was getting ready for the first one, I couldn't understand why I'd switched it on and plugged it in and it wasn't working, because even phantom was beyond me, So I kind of feel like the first thing I would say is, if I can do it, anybody can. And you can put things like this off forever because you don't feel like you understand enough, but you're probably going to have to start before you feel ready. And that was certainly my experience. And I was very lucky to have friends who sort of helped me with those early weeks. And I was motivated. I had made a commitment that I was going to start these concerts from September 2020, that I was going to do a concert every Thursday at 11 on Zoom until the end of the year. And if it was just me and my parents, I would play through all their favorite songs until the end of the year. So I knew I was going to do it. I was accountable. And it meant that I just, September came and I had to do it, but a very different experience from your end of the spectrum, which is being an expert and a specialist and a lecturer. And I definitely fudged my way, through those first things, and I'm still fudging my way. Sure, I can't tell my compressor from my condenser, so not the perfect route, Joe.
Well, just to go back to what people are probably confused about, even the word condenser at the moment. I mean, there are two different types of microphones. Just to make clear, there's the condenser and the dynamic, and one of them needs powering, which is the condenser. Yeah. And that's the 48 volts that you were talking about, the little switch on the side of the phantom powering switch. And just, I just want to clear that up because they just work slightly differently. The dynamic is almost a mechanical version of a microphone. In the way it works, it's just a magnet or something like a magnet that picks up the vibrations, whereas condenser is all electronic. It's not, they've been around for almost the same length of time, although the dynamic one would have been invented first. But certainly the condensers have been around since the 50s and probably before that. But you know, as you say, it is quite difficult to comprehend all this. It's new to most people. In fact, the whole Zoom thing is as new to me as it is to you.
Yeah.
Because it only came on stream when the pandemic started. Even doing stuff online was unheard of because basically delays, sound going out of sync with the pictures, all that sort of problem that we had with things. And even, I mean, I have done recordings for people in Los Angeles here in the studio in County Clare.
Oh, you've done remote recording, okay.
I've done remote recording, but never tried to do it live. We always sort of sent a mix of what we wanted to. We added in the instruments here, sent that back to them as both a mixed sound and as a separate files. So if they didn't like it, they could rejig it. Yeah. So it was possible to do, but it was a nightmare. And there's now software out there called Jamulus, which people are saying.
Have works. You? I was tempted to ask, have you used Jamulus yet?
I have tried it, and I think it's a question of getting used to it. I know that there's a few people out there using it and using it successfully for doing rehearsals. Okay. I know of a string quartet that are actually able to rehearse using it. Okay. But I think it's a question of having to get used to the slight delay. Sound takes a while to travel.
Yeah.
So, you know, it has to go down a wire out somewhere, and if your person you're playing with is if they're next door, it still goes out into for miles of wiring before it comes in next door. So there has to be delay. There's no way around. There's no physical way around it. Yeah. But mentally, I think if you can minimize that delay, you can probably get used to playing with people with slight delay.
Yeah.
Harp, I say, it's very difficult to do because it's harp. With harp, it's very difficult to do, and guitar, any of the plucking instruments can be very difficult to do because the sound is instantaneous. The minute you pluck the string, it's instantaneous. With a bow, there's a slight delay between when you start the bow and when the actual sound sort of comes out. Now it's tiny, we're talking about microseconds, but it's there, which makes it easier for string players. And the same with wind players. Wind players, well, obviously they can tone and get instantaneous sounds, but still a build-up. But the harp sound is very sharp, and it starts immediately. So that's why I said it probably is very difficult with the harp to actually play along with something.
I think people are now at this stage in lockdowns and pandemic and just the industry in general, you know, having grinded to such a halt, I think musicians and creative people are just willing to try anything to maintain that creative connection. I mean, I know for myself, when I started the concerts, like the only thing I really wanted from them was to connect with an audience. And earlier during the first lockdown, there's a group that I'm involved with that rehearse in the National Concert Hall called the Blow the Dust Orchestra, and they're an orchestra of people of varying ages, but it was started during the Bealtaine Festival. So some of the members would be older and would have been with the orchestra since the very beginning, so over 10 years ago. And I was very conscious that a lot of the members of that orchestra were of cocooning age, might be living alone, and we had a few months of lovely weekly rehearsals lined up between March and May that obviously weren't going to happen. And so the precursor to the concerts being request concerts for me was that I just sent an email, you know, into the education kind of guys in the concert hall to say, look, you know, I'm happy to play any request for the Dusties, as we call them, and if you want to send an email, I'd just be happy just to connect. And just so I started doing little videos, you know, for them, and then my sister-in-law at the time was like, you've got to do Zoom concerts, you should set it up and it would be lovely for the family to connect and all that kind of stuff. And I sort of just ignored it because I was so petrified of technology and so petrified of my absolute lack of knowledge that I sort of fobbed her off. But I am friends with a harpist based in the UK called Olivia Jagers, and she started doing Zoom concerts and was very active on social media about them. So I reached out to her in the summer months and I said, look, you know, this little idea won't go away. And, you know, she was really encouraging, really lovely. And so then I thought, right, I'm just going to pick a date and kind of start to do it. But so much of, I think, for anyone who has that niggling want to do something online, and yet it's a tug of war between that and feeling completely out of their depth. I think it's going to be there's going to be an inevitable tug of war when it comes to a steep learning curve in technology, and you have to just I had to just embrace the drama. Like every Thursday morning when I was getting ready for this Zoom concert, I was like a maniac, you know, because I was double checking cables and double checking buttons, and then because it's a request concert, this was before I had an iPad, so every sort of Wednesday evening the requests would come in hard and fast. I would be on the internet trying to find sheet music, printing it out, sticking it together. I was using the sitting room, so of course every Wednesday evening I would sort of ban the dogs and the children and everybody. Once the kids went to bed, I was like, right, I have to turn this place into a studio. So I had to kind of try and remember where I was putting everything, set it all up, and then scratch it on Thursday. So I never felt more of an affinity for, you know, the silent magical crews who come in and create the stage and create the setup, because all I was doing was setting up 2 microphones, a harp, an audio interface, a laptop, and you'd swear I was, you know, building the Eiffel Tower, because it just felt that gargantuan. So it in stages, you know, it can feel like a big thing, but I still think at the moment, you know, the outcome to connect with whoever it is, you know, is a musician's audience or family or whatever. I think it's worth it. You know, I think in my experience, certainly, it gave me a renewed sense of purpose at a time that has been so challenging for all of us. And that has really sustained me now through all of these recent lockdowns. We just finished our second kind of season of Harp O'Clock there last week, and the third one will start towards the end of April. And I enjoy the break from an hour and 15 minutes of a weekly requests concert, and I'll do some of my own practice and different projects and stuff like that. But for me, Harp O'Clock really was the start of a lot of lovely new things, you know, and lovely new collaborations and stuff like that. So my setup at the moment is I'm in the spare room, and this I'm not in a theatre. This is a green screen, which was the next thing for me. We were talking about kind of compromises when we were chatting the other day, and all the various compromises. And one of the many compromises for me is that this green screen is only so big. So I have to be really careful about how I place myself and the harp so that I just about fit within the green screen. And within that, then you know, there is a certain distance that the camera has to be, and that the lights need to be, and then I've got the microphones need to be, you know, all that stuff is sort of an ongoing compromise. But it's sort of developed, you know, I suppose I love the green screen because it's just a bit slick, and it means that I can choose whatever. This is my favorite little picture here, but there are lots of options with green screen. And my brother was begging me from when I started doing the concerts to get a green screen, but sure, my head couldn't handle the idea of, you know, I was only just about wrapping my brain around the idea that I had to click the phantom button on the audio interface. I wasn't ready.
I'd go back a slight step there and say green screen is absolutely fantastic, but it does add another limitation to, as you say, unless you can fill the room with green, if you know what I mean, which is what they do in the movies. I mean, if you saw a movie of some of these superhero movies and saw it being shot, and you walked into the room, and like there are big boxes and tables and chairs and all sorts of things in the room, but they're all color green. And the idea is that they can actually change it later on, and the walls, ceiling, the floor, all green. So they can add the grass, and they can add the boulders, and they can add what if the guys are climbing up on things. They just make them out of wood, and then they they superimpose. It's fantastic. But as you said, when you've got a very small one, I have a very small one in there behind as well. I've only used it once, but it does limit you to the size of the screen. So you can't
especially with harps. I mean, come on, we're not talking about whistles here, do you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you, I mean, ideally, I would love to be able to see all of the harp and all of you in the shot. But with the green screen, you can't do that. So, and then, but it doesn't limit where you put the microphones, because as long as you're not afraid of seeing microphones in shot, it doesn't really matter. It was one of the things that actually has come out of this is that for years, video directors would freak if they saw a microphone in shot, and even with music, and particularly classical music. And nowadays they're saying, well, we need to get the best sound we can, so they don't worry anymore. I did one last week actually in St. Mary's Cathedral in Limerick, a location shoot for video, and it's 6 cameras, and they weren't even worried about the cables on the floor. Which a couple of years ago, I'd have had to try and hide and put twice as much cable in, and it's because they say the sound is just as important now as the video. And in fact, I would argue, being a sound engineer, the sound is more important.
And I think even now there's an appreciation for capturing live sound as opposed to, you know, shooting just video from a pre-recorded sound. You know, it took me quite a few concerts to adjust to playing into the void, to trusting that there was an audience hidden somewhere on my laptop that were sitting warmly, enthusiastically waiting to hear the music I was going to play. Because all you have in your room is you and the kit, and it can feel like it's not a real gig, it's not a real performance, it's not a real concert. You can't hear people shuffling or reacting or applauding. Playing into the void was a big adjustment for me, and I think it's been a great learning actually, to have to just be solid in your own intention as a performer and as a musician, to be like, okay, well, this is how it's coming out. And it can feel very lonely when you're in a room by yourself. You know, it feels much closer to practice performance than actually getting that sense of return from an audience. And that has been a huge adjustment, but I think it has been good practice. It has been good practice to have to just go with it. And my motto for 2020, I had 2 of them. One was fail forward, because I've just fell flat in my face so many times with just trying to get to grips with technology, and, you know, even just how many USB inputs can you have, you know, on a laptop, and buying external adapters and all that kind of stuff. So fail forward was one for sure. And connection, not perfection. I had to make an agreement with myself that if I was going to agree to do basically a weekly requests show for a half of the year, that nothing was going to be perfect. That, you know, I was going to be sight reading or improvising or outside my comfort zone every week, for the length of a full solo concert. And that only happens if you can kind of draw a line in the sand and embrace the mistakes. And that in itself has been another really brilliant learning curve. And I would be a comfortable, you know, I've been, you know, around the gig block a few times. You know, it's not that I was coming to it very green or not used to, you know, the performance circuit, but it sort of stepped it up a notch. And I think the slight discomfort of not having the cushion of a live audience sort of brought that learning home that bit more. So, you know, I'm very grateful for that. It's something I never would have done if not for a pandemic. Absolutely no way. You know, if you could have told me 2 years ago that I would be doing a weekly Zoom concert or a weekly, you know, live concerts on Facebook, I would have laughed. I would have roared laughing, because it was just so removed from my experience, you know, as a musician at that time. One of the big things I treated myself to this year was an iPad. I know that you're using your iPad at the moment, aren't you? I didn't have an iPad, and oh my God, like, and I didn't want to. Everyone told me it's a game changer. It's brilliant. If you get the Pro, it's that bit bigger. You can get really good secondhand ones and blah, 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 blah. And I just didn't want to believe it because, again, I think, I'm an innate sort of dinosaur, and I don't embrace technology well. I have to be shunted, into it. But total game changer. I don't know, like, the amount of time I spent printing sheet music before and replacing cartridges, and now I just have to download the PDF and I'm away in a hack. So you know harps online, like, certainly embracing aspects of technology that can help, have just completely transformed the way I'm going to be able to operate now. And I think it's something musicians are going to have to embrace much more from now on. I mean, I don't think there's any going back. I mean, has your pandemic experience, like you said that you were doing remote recordings, would that have been pre-pandemic, or has the way you've had to work, has that changed massively?
I did a few pre-pandemic recordings where the main instrumentalists were in, say, like LA.
Yeah.
Or whatever, and then they wanted a local musician, a fiddle player or whatever, here, and it was done differently. It wasn't done live or anything like that. It was just done with backing tracks, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the one thing that worries me about it doesn't worry me. I'm not sure. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen once this is all over.
Yeah.
I think, people will be, I know I say to myself, I was not a great concert goer, but I would go, particularly when I lived in Dublin, I would go maybe once a month to National Concert Hall or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm actually now saying I would love to go to a concert.
Yeah.
And in fact, during one of the breaks, the ICO the Irish Chamber Orchestra did a concert in Limerick. Live one. It was the only one that did it. They did two on a one night because they were so booked out.
Yeah.
Obviously, the numbers in the hall were way down because
social distancing. Yeah.
Social distancing, yeah. But to be at it, a live concert, some unusual music as well, with Dermot Dunn playing the accordion, and that it was just so fantastic to be there.
Yeah.
And that's what I miss.
Yeah.
Within the recording studio, obviously, there's very, very little happening.
Okay.
I do quite a bit of the stuff for Harp Ireland and Quarterly Pitch, where they send me tracks to try and improve the sound on, or mixing. When they did the thing with 200 harps there earlier.
You were busy that week.
that was, and then later on did one with, I think it was 40 harps, and then they did a trio only about a week or two ago. So they're talenting. They get sent to me. I have no control over what the sound's going to be like when they come in, but I try my best to try and improve it. And the one thing I have learned is that whether you're using an interface, it's better, obviously, and it's always going to sound better if you have a dedicated microphone and the interface feeding into whatever you're recording on, whether it's the computer or your iPad or iPhone. But I've always been surprised at how reasonable, I won't say good, but reasonable the sound you can get from your phone is.
Yeah.
That the biggest problem with the phone is that there's no control over the sound. With an interface, you can actually turn it up and down, and you can avoid distortion. If you overplay or play too loud with your phone, the sound can at worst distort. But even if it doesn't distort, it's probably going to be slightly compressed, so you lose dynamic range on it. The soft parts come up in level, and the loud parts it's sort of compression. And I think an awful lot of people, when they heard the recordings, were sort of saying, those musicians aren't very good because they don't have any dynamic range in their playing. They don't know when to play soft, they don't know when to play loud. And of course, the other aspect of doing it, multiple musicians and then adding together is when they're not playing it live with each other. The difficulty is that they don't know when the other person's playing softer, so that they can then tone down.
Yeah.
So you might have one person actually who has the proper setup and getting to the dynamic range, and then another musician who doesn't. So I had to play around with that sort of thing on the thing
Which is
to
a huge challenge in post, you know, because
yes,
then you're having
yeah,
to make decisions that you could assume under an ordinary
exactly,
performance
yeah,
environment,
yeah,
the
yeah,
musicians would be making them without maybe being really conscious of that. You know, if it was the normal ensemble playing, you know, those dynamics, you know, people are, you're responding to the people in the room, or you're following a
exactly,
conductor,
yeah.
or, you know, so you're having to be, you know, the
You're
MD
like you're
there
like
and
a
make
conductor.
decisions.
Yeah, you're like a
Yeah.
conductor trying to get, you know, what you're actually doing
Yeah.
with fighters rather than
Did you
rather than.
enjoy that? Did you
Oh, I
like?
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I did. It's another. I, I I'm basically a musician, sound engineer, rather than a
Yeah.
sound engineer who plays music. I've always. I mean, my first career was actually in the RT Symphony Orchestra. That's when I started.
Okay.
When I left school, I went into the RT Symphony Orchestra,
So you can
and
take the fella out of the symphony orchestra, but you can't take the symphony orchestra out of
that's telling
him.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was there for a few years, and then eventually, when I was in my mid-20s, I decided that I didn't want to do that as a career. And just out of the blue, got a phone call from one of the sound heads of sound departments in RT
Go
asking me
away.
would I be interested, because they always knew I was technical.
Okay.
I hung around with the sound guys when they were recording.
Okay.
I was always asking questions. My
So you
father
always
was
had an itch for
yeah.
that sort of thing. Okay.
So I fell into it relatively easy.
Okay.
And the fact that I can read music and play music
Yeah.
is a big advantage in the studio.
Yeah.
Because I can follow a score, I can follow what other people are doing. Not that you get that much of a chance with, particularly with trad or jazz or rock or anything like that. You don't get, or pop music, you don't get scores. You know, but certainly with classical music, when I've done it, it's very, very useful to be able to follow a score. And when you see a score and you can see the dynamic markings on it, and one of the pieces I got recently, the trio had dynamic markings on it, so I was able to see that they should go up and down in level and follow the arranger's instructions.
Yeah. And do you think like after, you know, please God, you know, more and more are getting vaccinated now, and we're sort of grinning and bearing 2021, and we've got our fingers crossed for 2022. Do you think like the balance of your work in terms of what is remote or online will shift back to pre-pandemic, or do you think we've moved into a kind of a new way of doing things, that the percentage of work that you'll do which will have that remote element will be greater after the pandemic?
Yeah,
you do.
I think it'll probably be, there'll be balance between the two, because if people have invested as you have in the technology, there's no reason why they should travel 50, 60, 100 miles to the local studio when they can just as easily do it at home.
Tell you what, it's great not putting the harp in the car on a rainy day. In between the lockdowns, I had a gig. Where was it? I can't even remember what month. I think it might have been October in Dublin, and it was the first time in I don't know how many months that the harp had left the house. And the rigmarole of putting the covers on, I think I wouldn't have thought about before. And it was lashing the whole day. And I was cursing. I was cursing having to bring the bloody thing into town and find parking. And I think it was in City Hall, and it was just, they changed the parking setup. And I was just, you know, I still have my socks on here, you know, I'm very cozy in the spare room, don't have to go anywhere. So I think definitely the like, certainly for me, I would love to be able to continue to continue to use the gear that I've invested in. Also, I mean, another thing for me, this and I didn't anticipate this. So doing the Harp O'Clock for me has been very transformative. There's something that's been just so gratifying and connecting and lovely and very humbling about just being willing to play music that people ask for, you know, and to listen to the stories that people have behind their choice. There's just been something so kind of lovely about that. but I've totally lost my train of thought now on what I was gonna say. So I like, oh yeah, is that, you know, for some people it's sort of their life is always in lockdown. You know, for people who are immunocompromised, for people who have severe disabilities that impede them accessing venues or accessing um, theatres or festivals or events or whatever, just, you know, kind of normal life for us that we might take for granted. That's been a real eye opener for me. So certainly, um, I will endeavor to continue, you know, online stuff for that reason. If only for that reason, you know, if the need for the Zoom concerts goes in 90%, you know, of people, there will still be 10% for whom just having the chats and the laughs and to share a bit of music and to share a connection on a human level will still be important. And like, I'm there with bells on. You know, that has been something that has been really lovely to do. Um, and like as part of the Harp O'Clocks, I connected with some nursing homes as well. And at a time when family weren't able to see each other, at times it was quite emotional, you know, because you could have a family member um, at home, you know, in their house, and then you might have a family member in a nursing home and them connecting through the concerts. And that was another just really lovely thing to be a part of. And I that was a kind of a hidden, you know, thing for me. I didn't realize that that was going to happen as a result of online concerts. I am generally allergic, or certainly pre-pandemic, I was just really uncomfortable with self-promotion online. Really uncomfortable with it. Never really quite sure how to approach it. Would share the odd post online of whatever event or concert I might be involved in, but would always kind of slightly cringe. And I think it's something that a lot of freelance musicians suffer from, because you know, you have to promote what you're doing, but at the same time, if 90% of your friends are fellow musicians, you're kind of thinking, Ash, that's the last thing they want to be seeing on the one day they don't have a gig, is to, you know, have to come to my gig. Um, but now on this side of it, having done so much online, I suppose I understand better that it's possible to just be sharing news of what you're doing, and that there's no expectation. You know, it's just that there are people who'll be interested and there are people who won't. And so I suppose that would be another little message I would have for people who might be watching this and they're thinking, okay, so you know, I'm going to need an audio interface ideally, and I can get a half decent sound on my iPhone. That's good to know. And they're kind of ticking the boxes of what they might think. And the last thing for me was the cringe factor, you know, and just the kind of, oh, am I really going to put myself out there? And God, is that really what people, you know, need to be seeing? But the more I connected with people and the more it became a lovely thing, the less I focused on that, the less that was kind of an issue. And again, I think, you know, in terms of harps online, I think it's something that fellow musicians, you know, and anybody, you know, yourself, Joe, any of us in the industry are going to have to embrace, because life has moved online well and truly, and that's where people are spending their time, and that's where people are finding out about stuff. So I think we all have to, you know, embrace that, you know, self-promotion thing and online presence, and just sharing what we're doing online so that people are aware of what we're doing, you know. And that's doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. But and Joe, like, would you be an avid social media, or like what kind of
No,
relationship would you
quite the
have
opposite. Yeah,
on the subject of online activity?
yeah,
No,
yeah.
okay.
I follow a few people on Facebook, and that's about it. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
and even my own website, I haven't updated for, I don't know, you know, 4 or 5 years, let's say.
Okay.
You know, CD is always my wife's always given out to me, but I don't promote the studio enough, and I don't.
I see. Like
I'm
we're
getting to the
all.
age, yeah, I'm getting to the age now where I don't feel that I need to anymore. So.
Yeah. Well, there's that as well, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah,
there's, I suppose, there is an element of that as well, of course. You know that maybe if you're not brand new into the industry and into the scene, that you know you're sort of you've been through the mill, you've been vetted, and there's a certain amount of that. But certainly, I would see with a lot of musicians and players kind of my generation, they're all over, you know, Instagram and Facebook, and I'm more consistent than I was before, but it's all a learning. I think it's all just kind of getting more comfortable with it, you know, being okay.
One of the really nice things about this is that there are harp players all around the country now. I'm talking about harp because we're talking about two harpists, but who would never have been in a recording studio, would never have, you know, and probably would get to the stage where they're quite good at it, but only play the occasional gig, and they go off, become teachers or whatever, they do their engineering, and you know, and it's fantastic that they are getting even a slightest bit of exposure. I mean, that 200 harps last year, you know, like, who knew that there was 200 harp players in the country?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and that kind of connective tissue, do you know, that kind of doing that online means visually to see that, and to visually see that people are spread across the country, you know, or spread across the globe, you know, big time. I think in terms of the global community or the national community, I really hope that the online stuff continues, because I think it serves a purpose that that can only really be served online, you know, even visually, you know, as you say, just to actually just see all these people in their own homes doing what they do, there's something really powerful about that.
There is, yeah. I mean, it's you know, particularly if the young people, they're getting to stay where they can, they're getting exposure.
Yeah.
It's all going to be good for them eventually. I mean, this pandemic is not going to last. And it's you know, even just apart from the fact that they've proved that they can do it, that they can sit down and play a piece from one end to the other without, you know, making mistakes or whatever, or even if they do make mistakes, they can be covered up. You know, and they just it's hard to put this into words, but it's something I never got. I mean, I was lucky when I was growing up, when I was a really young kid. I'm talking about when I was maybe in my early teens. My family, as a group, we broadcast quite a few pieces on RTE on radio, because a bit of nepotism here. We had relations that worked in radio in RTE, and so I actually did get a bit of exposure when I was a kid into the how. Before that, a radio and a TV were just boxes in the corner that you listened to or watched.
You saw inside the infrastructure all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah. And these, you know, going into the studios in RTE, the radio studios, and these enormous big studios, and some quite small ones, but mostly were in the big ones. And saying, you know, and the technology and the huge big mixing desks, which are more or less disappearing these days. They're shrunk down to virtually nothing. I mean, your interface is the equivalent of a mixing desk. So I was lucky, but most people nowadays don't have that chance. And most people don't have that chance, or didn't until this happened. And they were then asked to do something themselves. And they realized that A, they've got a really good camera in their pockets, and B, they can also record sound, you know, on the same device. And I've noticed there's an awful lot of sort of, not just from a music point of view, but from a video and artistic point of view, there's a lot of stuff happening that probably would not have happened.
Yeah.
And people are not afraid anymore because they've seen the people who started doing it and maybe weren't that good at it.
Yeah.
And, you know, they said, well, I can do just as good as that with my camera and my phone. So let's try it, you know. So you know, it might be a big drawback at the moment to us, but it might be a huge, huge thing in a few years' time, where we realize that everybody or anybody can do it.
Yeah. Although it's funny, I mean, because some people would say the sort of the democratization of technology, you know, the kind of the general access, you know, en masse to all of this stuff comes with another set of issues, or, you know, not complications, but just that there are two sides to that, you know, the kind of way where like, is it a good thing that we can all sort of, you know, take video, and that the phone makes all these decisions, and, you know, there's no figuring out aperture, or there's no, you know, you can whack on reverb without no understanding of the decisions, you know, that need to be made here.
I think the more people do it, the more they realize that it doesn't sound so great. Is there some better way of doing it?
Yeah.
Or doesn't look so great? Is there a better way of doing it? And I like, as you were saying at the very beginning, when you first came to this, it was just use the iPhone or the iPad or the microphone in the computer, and then eventually you got the audio interface and the sound.
Oh no! I tell you what, I did them from the laptop camera, but I knew I was not doing these unless I had the audio interface. I didn't really like the visuals. I was kind of like, look, should there's a camera on, they'll be able to see me and they'll be able to see the harp, and it won't be high definition. But I knew I couldn't do it until I knew what was the right way for the sound. You know, because I was paranoid, you know, about the fact that I couldn't do a concert without knowing that the sound would be would sound like a harp that was, you know, captured in the room, kind of thing. So but it's funny when I look back at some of those first videos, you know, I had the harp placed ages away in the sitting room and the laptop ages away, and I had to sort of run from, you know, the harp when I finished playing something over to the laptop, because it was the only way to get all of the harp into the picture, you know, and, you know, all of that. So it's really funny to see the first concerts now, which were fine and were lovely, but just I was using the camera on the laptop there, and so I had a stack of books, and I had, you know, it at an angle because the camera's really low down, so you couldn't see the keys, and all this kind of jiggery pokery to try and just get the image. And now, of course, I just have an external webcam. And again, like, without the help of friends just in the know, you know, friends in the industry, friends who were just kind and kind of liked the idea of what I was doing and were willing just to say, to be generous with their time and say, okay, so this is how you set it up, this is what you do. Have a little list next to you, so that, you know, like there was one, I started doing live things on Facebook in the new year, for a number of reasons. When I started doing the concerts on Zoom, I didn't really know what ticket price to put on it, how to do it, all of that kind of stuff. So I decided I would just do, like, here's a few ticket prices, pay what you think you want. And there was also a kind of a donation thing. So I just kind of said, I'll just see what people pay and then I'll whittle it down to that. And so that was fine. And then the last concert of every month in 2020 went to a charity called Masisi Africa, which my cousin set up in 2007. And basically, she is responsible for serving over 3 million meals to children in the Lesotho area in Africa. And she's amazing. And she does it all herself. And so I decided that that would keep me accountable. If I was feeling the cringe and I didn't want to do it anymore, I'd be like, well, tough, because, you know, Lucy's going to be waiting to see how we get on at the end of the month. But in the new year, we decided that it would be a lovely way for her to connect with the people who already follow and support her, to do something online on Facebook on an open kind of platform. And another thing I've been trying to do is connecting in with people who are living in direct provision, just to let them know these concerts are happening anyway, and they're more than welcome, and it would be lovely to have them. But I've found that kind of difficult, to just get the word out there, and, you know, to get people to want to come. You know, maybe it's not the right kind of concert for them or whatever, but that's something I've been trying to do. So I decided to do the short mini concerts on Facebook, because you can't get more open and democratic than that. Everybody has access, you know. And I think that's another thing, that it's a two-edged sword. I did really think about it before I did the first one, because I thought, I'm basically putting a mini concert out there for free, and there are issues with that, you know. You should put a value on things. But I like the habit of the tip jar concerts on social media, because it does, again, it does open it up to more people, and it means that people who are in a position to and who are moved to can put something in your tip jar. And that people who aren't in a position or aren't bothered don't have to. They can still tune in or tune out. So that has been another interesting thing that, again, is only because of just trying things out during the pandemic. But so yeah, so there you go. I could talk to you all day, Joe.
We've been talking a little bit about the technology from the video point of view. How are you streaming?
Oh yeah. Good question. So we're obviously just doing this in Zoom. So I'm just have a virtual background on, and I'm just using the Zoom platform, and I have Zoom is just taking in my external webcam. So that's all that is. But for the streams, this is where I got a lot of help from a great friend, Matthew, who was just really, really patient and kind. I spent a lot of time in December tearing my hair out trying to understand OBS, an open broadcasting system, a free kind of setup online. But I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I just had no experience of using any sort of video editing software, anything like that. And so just configuring everything just melted my head, and it was a massive failure. And so I sort of nearly threw the laptop at the wall, and I was done with it. I stream the concerts through OBS now that my friend helped me to kind of set it all up. So I have that all set up. I open OBS on my laptop, and I set it up there, and I point that OBS recording to a platform online called Restream. And there are a lot of these streaming platforms that allow you to send your video that you're capturing to various different locations online. So basically through Restream, I'm able to send my live stream to Facebook, to a few different Facebook pages if I want. So when I'm doing it for Miss Easy Africa, I'll be going onto my own Facebook page and their Facebook page, as well as my YouTube channel and Twitter. So you can live stream. I think they're changing the rules on Twitter towards the end of this month, actually. So I'll watch this space. Maybe it won't be possible in April. So basically, OBS, which points to Restream, which sends it to various different locations. And you pay more on Restream based on how many different locations you want to be able to send them to, because there are dozens of different social media platforms that you can stream live to now. I don't know the names of half of them. So that's how I do it. And once it's the sort of thing, once it's set up, it's so easy. But for somebody who's new to it, it's just that first time trying to understand what very long piece of code needs to link into it. I mean, it is difficult. And I do think there's a place at the moment for people who might, consult with musicians who are trying to set this stuff up, so that individual musicians, not just organizations or ensembles, can do this. I was lucky, and I had the gumption to keep trying, but I also had friends without whom, I would have managed, but I don't think I would have managed in the way that I have, because I just didn't have the knowledge, I just didn't have the experience to. And I'd love to see more of that, to be honest, because I think it's individual freelance gigging musicians who've lost out hugely in all of this. And there was an investment in kit. There's no denying the fact that if you want to do stuff online, certainly for me, the first thing I did was I swapped, and I got a condenser microphone and the audio interface and the cables and the really super long cable into the internet, so that I wasn't relying on Wi-Fi. And there are all these things that are, an investment of time and money. So I think it would be nice to see that if there was kind of consultation set up for musicians like myself to be able to do similar. Having said that, as you said, I've seen live videos streamed from an iPad. Like, I've seen quartets do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, even that software you mentioned, OBS, I mean, it's free, but it's cross-platform. It's PC, it's Mac, and as far as I remember, I think you can download an iPad version of it as well. Yeah. And I mean, eventually you might even decide to put a second camera in. And,
that's been suggested to me. Yeah. I'm like, I've just about got over the green screen and this every time, and you were mentioning the mixing desk. Every time I'm like, okay, I'm set up. Somebody says, have you considered? I'm like, oh man, the sky's the limit with these harps online, I tell you.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about the whole technology is that what you can do now, even what we are doing now, was not available 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, particularly from the video point of view, it's sound doesn't change very much. The actual technology behind sound doesn't change very much, but the technology behind video goes in leaps and bounds. I mean, we talk about high definition has been the sort of the standard that we now have in our homes, but the next up from that is what they go 4K, and then they came up with 6K. Before 6K even came available to people, they jumped to 8K, and each of these is a huge advance in the quality of what you're doing, and the sound doesn't change that much. I mean, the sound hasn't the sound is still basically, well, it's not stuck, but it's got there's the standard that was set up for CD and for broadcasting the sound that hasn't actually moved on that much. There probably isn't a need for it because the microphones that we have are more adequate. The microphones that we have here in our ears, have a limit to them.
Yeah.
But our eyes can actually pick up. Now, most people can pick up HD and 4K or standard definition and HD, but it's changing rapidly. And then the little cameras that you can buy nowadays for a few hundreds that have all the streaming built into them.
I know.
They even got stereo microphones built into them, and you just plug it into your USB port in your computer, send it to wherever you want to send it, and it's you can do your live broadcast that way.
Yeah.
And even companies like Zoom, who make little audio interfaces and portable audio recorders, they now have a camera out, which you can actually plug 6 microphones into.
I know.
It's the technology is just evolving.
The technology is great, but I still think there's you still have to know where to put the microphone. You still have to understand, there are certain things that you kind of can't that just take time, and just take that without your experience, it just takes listening back and training. My ear isn't trained in the way that yours is, and so I can listen to something that's been mixed or mastered, or that the annoying frequencies in a room have just been neutralized, and think, oh, that's just so lovely and clear and beautiful. But I can't get that myself. I don't understand how to kind of neutralize out those frequencies, and so I think for that reason there's something very tactile about what you do.
Yeah, to reinforce that, basically I always talk about a balance. Even if you're only talking about the microphone, there's a balance. There's a balance involved, and the balance is between the instrument and the room you're in. And what you've got, the green screen that's behind you, to us now looking at you, it looks like a big heavy theatrical curtain. It's not there, presumably. It's just a blank wall.
Just a blank wall. I'll see if I can switch off the virtual background here for people who you keep chatting there, and I'll see if I can switch it off. There I am.
There we are. Yeah, it's just a blank wall, complete with shadows and everything from the lights.
I know. I haven't nailed the lighting yet.
Yeah, but one of the things about a room is that an empty room is always going to sound slightly hollow, particularly if it's a square room or a slightly larger than square room. And the best rooms are always going to be slightly elongated. They're going to be long rectangles. But the distance between the floor and the ceiling has a big bearing on the sound as well. And the worst place you could put a microphone is right in the middle of the between the ceiling. Now I'm looking at a huge 14-foot ceiling in here in the studio, so I don't really have any problems. I don't even know if I have a mic stand that will actually go up to the ceiling, but you keep the microphone away from the midpoint between walls and things like that. And that's the starting point with all of these. But once you get to realize what happens in a room, you can actually work where you think the microphone might be the best. If you bring a microphone too close to a harp, the harp strings, some of the strings are further away from the microphone than others. So if I can't demonstrate a harp here, these are the strings going along here. And if I put a microphone here, obviously these strings are going to sound louder than these strings because it's that much closer to that. So basically you start what I call the midpoint. When people ask me, how do I record a fiddle? I said, how wide is a fiddle? How big is a fiddle? And I usually say, well, how big is the sound producing part of the fiddle, which is really the belly of the fiddle or guitar. And start by putting the microphone exactly the same distance away as the size of the instrument.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that gives you the balance of the instrument. But then you can actually then play around with that to get the balance between the instrument and the room by moving the microphone in and out.
Yeah, it's it's a fascinating. It's something that I into the remainder of this year, I see it as being the next head melt for me, because I've gotten to a point where I can capture the sound of a harp fairly honestly in the room. I can't say that I can make any magic happen, but I can be certain that the harp is captured, the kind of way, properly, and will and that's about it. But I would love to be able to do some tweaking just to understand the frequencies in the room that would be useful for me to reduce in the sound. I would just be delighted if by the end of this year that I had a greater understanding of that. Not about whacking on effects or whacking on reverb, or just to understand how to kind of equalize the sound appropriatly and tastefully. I would love that.
As I say, it's the balance between. Sorry, something popped up on the screen there. Sorry. The balance between the room and the microphone is where that comes in. In terms of just the physical part of that. Knowing that your room has particular problems in a particular area of the sound. It's actually relatively easy to figure out. There's a bit of maths involved in it, a bit of physics involved in it, but you just take measurements of your room and you can put them into a piece of software on the internet. It's free, and it'll tell you where the frequency problems of that particular room are.
Go away! Gosh, okay, I didn't realize that. There's an app for everything.
There's an app for everything, yeah, and it's a strange one, because if you do it, no matter what room you do it in, it's only going to give you a rough idea of what could be the problems. But things like having a sofa or a curtain or something will then change that, because it may or may not absorb that particular frequency. And that's why you see people putting these sort of what people used to refer to as egg boxes on the walls. But in fact, egg boxes don't work at all. So it's waste time. But these foam panels
to absorb those frequencies.
And they're designed to minimize that frequency that might be a problem in the room. But again, you have to buy one specific to the frequency, so you have to know the frequency that you know. So now, buying one specific to frequency is not as difficult as you think. You can buy the same panel, but you can actually change the frequency by moving it further.
Oh gosh, okay. See, now I'm sorry you're telling me all this, because I'll never be seen again, Joe. The pandemic will be long gone, and I'll be in the spare room sticking bits of foam to the walls, trying to figure out where the frequencies are. But listen, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so lovely, so much nicer to chat through I suppose, a dinosaur's move online and embracing kind of the technology, and to be able to speak with someone with your experience and the patience to deal with a dinosaur like me has been so lovely. So thanks a million. And I suppose thank you to Harp Ireland, a big thank you to Harp Ireland for letting us chat about this in this way. It's something that is very relevant to all of us, whether we like it or not, for the next little while. And hopefully that this chat, along with your video demonstration, Joe, I'm sure will be really helpful and enlightening to everybody who is watching. But, you know, I'm sure it goes without saying that if people have particular questions or things that this is bringing up, I hope that you have been asking them as you've been listening, and please don't be shy, because definitely we'll be having a look at the comments and to see if there are anything we can answer. But I think the moral of the story is get cracking, isn't it? we're not moving anywhere outside of online.
So. First thing I say to when I was teaching to my students was always, the only rule about recording sound is that there are no rules.
Yeah.
There are too many variables.
Yeah.
You couldn't even tell, if you gave me the dimensions of your room, for instance, I could put it into the software and it'll tell me these are problem frequencies, but your room might sound completely different.
There are a million reasons why it might not work out that way in reality. Yeah.
So in reality, just move the microphone to where it sounds the best, and that's it. That's the simplest thing to do when you're talking about sound.
Yeah. Absolutely. Listen, Joe, thank you so much for this. This has been such a joy, and hopefully, sure, we'll get to do it again soon.
Yes.
Thanks a million. Maybe in the same room. Gosh, who knows? 2022. what 2022 might bring to us all. Who thunk it? Listen, thanks a million, Joe.